Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, setting the record straight about climate. What I'm going to show you in this video was originally going to be part of a much longer story, but I realized that this was a very interesting story in itself. I'm going to start by reading part of a newspaper story from the Canberra Times dated November 21st, 2016. NASA chief slaps down climate skeptic Senator Malcolm Roberts. You hold a number of misconceptions. By Peter Hannum. You appear to hold a number of misconceptions which I'm happy to clarify at this time, Dr. Gavin Schmidt told Senator Roberts in letters and emails obtained by Fairfax Media. The claim that JIS has removed the 1940s warmth in the Arctic is not correct. The claim that NASA tampered with decades-old Arctic data is a favorite conspiracy theory among global warming skeptics, who argue the current run-up in temperatures, especially at the North Pole, is nothing exceptional, and so action to address climate change is unnecessary. Now we're going to look at the story behind this article. This graph from NASA shows the raw temperature data for the capital of Iceland going back to the year 1900. You can see that the warmest years in Iceland occurred around the year 1940, then they cooled sharply into the 1970s, and then have been warming again since. NASA is constantly altering their station temperature data all over the world, and this is what one version of the Reykjavik temperatures looked like about 7 or 8 years ago. You can see very clearly that they have removed the 1940s warmth, which was present in the raw temperature data. Peter Hannum from the Canberra Times called this conspiracy theory, but these graphs are right off the NASA website. Here's another more recent version taken directly off the NASA website from 2018. In this graph, the yellow line is the raw temperature data and the blue line is the adjusted data. Once again, you can see that they have removed the warmth of the 1940s. And NASA did exactly the same thing all over Iceland. Here are a few other sites where you can see the 1940s warmth has been removed. NASA has very consistently removed the 1940s warmth from the Iceland temperature record. Their desire to do this was discussed by the world's leading climate scientists in this ClimateGate email. From Tom Wigley at NCAR to Phil Jones at the University of East Anglia, copying Ben Santer from Lawrence Livermore National Labs. If we could reduce the ocean blip by, say, 0.15 degrees Celsius, then this would be significant for the global mean, but we'd still have to explain the land blip. It would be good to remove at least part of the 1940s blip, but we are still left with why the blip. It's very clear that they wanted to get rid of the 1940s warmth, and they didn't even have an explanation for why they were going to do it. It's also very clear that that is exactly what they did. They removed the 1940s warmth. 8 years ago, Paul Homewood from the UK questioned the Icelandic Met Office about these adjustments being made by NASA. Here's how Charles D. Johnson from the Icelandic Met Office responded. Regarding your questions, A. Were the Iceland Met Office aware that these adjustments are being made? No, we were not aware of this. B. Has the Met Office been advised of the reasons for them? No, but we are asking for the reasons. C. Does the Met Office accept that their own temperature data is in error and that the corrections applied by GHCN are both valid and of the correct value? The corrections, in quotes, are grossly in error in the case of Reykjavik, but not quite as bad for the other stations. But we'll have a better look. We do not accept these corrections. Does the Met Office intend to modify their own temperature records in line with GHCN? Answer. No. It's abundantly clear at this point that the data tampering being done by NASA to remove the 1940s warmth was completely invalid. So in November 2016, Australian Senator Malcolm Roberts sent this letter to Gavin Schmidt at NASA about the adjustments. In Australia, we have considerable concern about temperature adjustments made by NASA over many years, Senator Roberts wrote, including charts from a couple of Icelandic stations. In dropping the temperatures for the early period, the Arctic warmth for the 1930s and 1940s appears to have been removed, he said. What is your specific reason for doing this? Senator Roberts politely asked some very important questions to NASA about their data handling practices. And NASA and the Canberra Times predictably responded by being rude and declaring conspiracy theory. Gavin Schmidt from NASA responded by saying, I'm aware of who Malcolm Roberts is, and the only surprise is that he is in fact a senator. Gavin Schmidt is a civil servant being paid by U.S. taxpayers, and it's completely inappropriate for him to send this sort of response to a government official in a foreign country. And here's a real stunner down at the bottom of the page. In an email, Charles D. Johnson, senior meteorologist with a specialty in historical climatology at the Icelandic Met Office, told Senator Roberts that the temperature adjustments are quite sound. This is the same Charles D. Johnson from the Icelandic Met Office who is already on the record for saying the corrections are grossly in error and that he rejects them. So it's pretty clear that the climate mafia got to Charles D. Johnson, just like they have to so many other people. He completely reversed his story. But there's more to this intrigue. Here's the letter which Gavin Schmidt sent to Senator Roberts. Remember that Senator Roberts had queried him about the disappearing 1940s warmth, and Gavin Schmidt responded by saying, "It's not my data." He blamed the data tampering on NOAA's Global Historical Climatology Network. Here's what Gavin Schmidt wrote to Senator Roberts. Firstly, in the graphs, you show the data is quite clearly and correctly labeled as originating from GHCN. For your information, GHCN stands for the Global Historical Climatology Network and is a project of the NOAA National Center for Environmental Information, NCEI. This is very important, as I'm going to show you in a minute. NASA is saying that their data is not their own, they get it from NOAA. Now here is where the story gets really interesting. Over the last few months, NASA and NOAA have restored the 1940s warmth to the Arctic. There's now very little difference between the adjusted and the unadjusted temperatures at Reykjavik. And the same thing is now true at other locations in Iceland. After Senator Roberts queried NASA about their obvious fraud, NASA responded by insulting him, and then they went off quietly and fixed the data, thus confirming their own conspiracy theory. You could conclude that all's well that ends well, but that's not the case. NASA's webpage uses this graph as evidence for global warming. They claim that a bunch of independent agencies all came up with the same graph. But if we remember what NASA's Gavin Schmidt said when he was queried about the obviously bad data, he said, "It's not my data. We get our data from NOAA." So there's nothing independent about these agencies. Of course, these graphs all look very similar. They use approximately the same data, approximately the same methodology, and they talk to each other about the shape of the graph which they want to achieve. So NASA continues to defraud the public about global warming. And one more thing before we finish up. This is where the thermometer at Reykjavik is currently located, right next to a whole bunch of asphalt. The location of the thermometer probably adds a degree or two to current temperatures. Australian Member of Parliament Craig Kelly sent me an email this morning pointing this out. NASA and the Canberra Times want you to believe that everything I've shown you in this video is conspiracy theory, but all of the graphs I've shown you are right off the NASA website. They are committing this fraud right in front of our faces. Australia is very fortunate to have legislators like Senator Malcolm Roberts and Member of Parliament Craig Kelly who are unafraid to ask questions. However, it's unfortunate that the Canberra Times is more interested in propaganda than informing their readers. When newspapers make a decision to become propagandists rather than news sources, they're doing their country a great disservice. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science and propaganda for a long time.